Hey guys, welcome back. So today's the first day of summer, which honestly I can't believe, but it feels like it. It is hot, it is humid, and today I felt like I wanted to do a Q&A with you guys because I haven't done one in some time. And honestly, this week's been a little bit more of a dead week. There hasn't been too much going on outside of just everyday maintenance in the gardening, pruning, weeding, and watering. Kind of boring. So I wanted to just open up questions from you guys. So over here on YouTube and also Instagram, I asked you guys to ask me some questions and you guys asked me some good ones. So I am going to break this up into a few different categories. I have some personal questions. I had a good amount of gardening questions, and then I had chicken questions. So I'm going to kind of break them up into 3 sections, and I'll have timestamps down below if there's a certain area you want to skip to. Here's the questions here, and we're just going to start with some of the personal ones. So the question I'm going to start with today is introduce yourself. How old are you? Where are you from? Do you have kids? Are you married? So I am 31 years old. I'll be 32 toward the end of the year. I am from Kansas. I actually grew up all over the East Coast though, and I moved here, I want to say when I was 12. Yeah, I moved here when I was 11, 12? I want to say 12. Moved here when I was 12, so I've lived here more than half my life at this point. I am married and I don't have any kids. With the married question, I had so many questions about being married and my husband, and I had multiples of this. Will your husband ever make an appearance on the channel? Honestly, he's sprinkled in some videos where he might help me with like a build project, or you might hear his voice or something, but I don't think I have any videos. Oh, actually the strawberry cage video, you might see like little peeks of him in there. But outside of that, he has zero interest in social media. So you guys won't see him on this channel much. He helps me out a great deal when it comes to building things for the garden and giving me input and things like that. But for the most part, you guys will not see him. Have I always lived in Kansas? Is there somewhere else you would want to move? I did just kind of answer this. So I have not lived in Kansas my whole life. I moved here when I was roughly 12. I would love to go back to the Appalachian area. So I grew up mostly in South Carolina, but I lived in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio for some time. I moved around a lot until I ended up in Kansas. But I love the Appalachians. And if there was any state I could choose to move and do whatever with, I'd move to Tennessee, no doubt. Honestly, Kansas is great for what I want to do. When it comes to homesteading, having land, country, the state is pretty affordable, even though everywhere in the country really isn't affordable at the moment. This state is still more affordable than most, and it also has really good soil. So this is one of those things where if I want to homestead, Kansas might be it. This might be our last destination, but if we had an opportunity to just move, we'd probably move to Tennessee. You mentioned in one of your videos something about being in bodybuilding competitions. I'm interested to hear more about that. Is that something you still do, or how do you look back on that experience? So I do not do bodybuilding competitions anymore. If you do not know, I did do bikini bodybuilding competitions for roughly 5 years of my life in my early 20s. I quit before I started any of my gardening stuff. And that's kind of how I jumped into gardening. I really needed a new hobby, but I did do competitive bodybuilding for quite some time. I actually competed in the Arnold Amateur. I won a title once where I was a national competitor. But honestly, I look back at that experience as a big learning curve. I learned a lot about food and learning portion sizes and how to stay healthy during that time period, but I will never do that again. Honestly, I don't know if I could ever follow a diet like that again. It was really hard. It was very restrictive. I didn't drink for like 5+ years. I really didn't eat out much during that time. And when I met my now husband, after a year of us dating, that is when I quit. I really loved the stability of being in the relationship, being able to go out to dinner, doing things like that. And honestly, I look back at it as a great experience. It definitely taught me a lot of hard work ethic, especially during times I really wanted to quit because competing is super hard, but that's kind of the gist of that. I don't do it anymore. I honestly haven't even stepped foot inside a gym, I want to say, in probably like 7 or 8 years. What do I do for a living? This is what I do for a living. And this kind of follows into the next question. How did I start gardening / social media? My 20s was a wild ride. I started off being a hairdresser, and I did that career until I became severely allergic to hair color. This was like shortly after I met my husband. I became severely allergic to hair color. And then I was kind of in this hoopla of, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And at the time, that's when I competed at the Arnold, and I saw people vlogging and YouTubing, and I was like, I could do that. So I started social media back when I was doing bodybuilding stuff. And it was one of those things where it never took off. It never did anything. I was doing it for years. And then I actually quit. And I started working at a friend's liquor store, and that led into a wine sales career. And then COVID happened and I got let go of that career because not many people were interested in artisan wine at the time. So then during that time span of like 2020, I actually picked up my camera again. I started vlogging again. All of these videos are still live on the channel. So if you want to see what my garden looked like 4 years ago, man, has it been a journey. But I was starting to just vlog again at that time because 2020, obviously we're all home. I felt very bored. I was already gardening for a few years at that time, and I really just wanted an outlet again. I loved filming. I loved editing. I actually got into social media because I was my high school's broadcast producer, so I already learned a lot of editing there. But it was one of those things where I kept starting a new career and then it would just keep jumping back. And when all of that happened in it was actually 2021, I was let go of my last job of wine sales. I had a decent amount in savings, and my husband was like, go for it. My husband was very supportive, and he was just like, you know what, go for it, do your thing. Whew, and it has been a journey. I didn't make money for years. Needless to say, I honestly didn't even start making money off of YouTube until last year. So I was literally doing social media for about 4-ish years without making a dime. I just knew I was very passionate about sharing my life with others, and this is how it ended up turning out. A lot of sacrifice to get to where we are today. But honestly, looking back at this whole journey, I couldn't be more happy for where I'm at today. What kind of music do I listen to? So I honestly don't listen to all that much anymore. I was really big on like rap and techno during my bodybuilding days, and lately if I vibe to it, I'll listen to it. I am big on Taylor Swift. I am a Taylor Swift fan. I've been to one of her concerts. I kind of listen to a mix of a little bit of everything. And lastly, on the personal, have I thought about cutting my hair short? My hair has been short, guys. I grew out my hair from here. When I became extremely allergic to hair color, I had to strip all of the color out of my hair. My hair was jet black. My hair was extremely damaged, so I had to give myself a serious haircut because I had a serious chemical haircut. So it got chopped to about here, and then it's just been growing out ever since. I did take off about like, I want to say 5 or 6 inches at the beginning of the year, but I will say my hair will probably never be shorter than probably here. I like my hair long. Okay, so let's jump into gardening and homesteading. So how did I start my homesteading journey? Throughout time, I fell in love with growing food, and I kept expanding, and I added chickens, and it's one of those things where I absolutely love this lifestyle, and it kind of just happened. So what is your garden zone? I am 7A. We were 6B. I honestly don't notice much of a difference. So your zone really only is perennial. It doesn't matter when it comes to your first frost or your last average frost. Your zone is simply for perennial purposes. So I will say my zone when I'm doing garden tours and things like that, so you can get a general idea of the area I'm growing in. But honestly, your zone really doesn't matter. So don't think about that too much. How big would your dream property be? Would you like to keep meat animals? If so, what kinds? So my dream property is like 10 acres. I really want a 5 to 10 acre property. Ideally, I want an A-frame home. And I would love to keep animals. As far as meat animals go, me and my husband do want to run meat chickens, but he doesn't have a desire to butcher. I don't have a desire to really butcher. I would like to learn chickens, but I don't know if that's something I would really like to tackle on. We would like to keep animals. We do have friends that we're able to rely on at the moment, but I would also really just like to have animals for purposes such as alpaca, where I could shear them and then I could create my own yarn by spinning. I would like to have animals for a secondary purpose where I could keep them as pets, but also have them be part of the farm type scenario. Ideally, I really want a pig. I've wanted a pig for so long. I want rabbits, alpacas. I would love sheep. I kind of want a little bit of everything, but yeah, I think the hard part for us will be getting animals and dealing with more loss on the farm. I know it's been a little bit harder for me to deal with the loss of the chickens. I've had 3 chickens now die on me, and it gets easier each time. First time I got pretty sad about it, but it is just something that happens, and I think the more you're exposed to it, it's probably a little bit easier. But we do want some land and we do want animals. How do you manage your time spent on the garden while balancing life obligations? I do the best I can. I feel like I run around with my head cut off for about 2 to 3 months out of the year because there's constantly something that needs to be done. Honestly, in a space like mine, it can get overwhelming at times, but I really grew into this space, and I feel like this has been a great learning space for me because I started small and I grew into it, and whenever we do move, I feel like that will be a great learning curve for me. But this is a lot of work, especially during this time of year. We haven't even really approached the time where I'm doing a lot of canning yet. We really are just now getting going. Even though we've had a lot of the gardening season really get going, June, July, August, into the beginning of September, I am just so slammed busy that honestly, I really have to prioritize certain things. I wake up early this time of year. I go to bed late this time of year. During the day, during like when it's super hot and I can't be outside, I try to catch up on housework during that time, or I'm preserving something during that time. So needless to say, it's a lot of work, but I do try my best. Sometimes I do fall short. There's laundry that doesn't get done. There's dishes that doesn't get done. It happens. Just give yourself some grace and make a priority list and start checking that off. So what is the one piece of preserving equipment you would have if you could only have one? Canner, freeze dryer, dehydrator, etc. So if I could only pick one type of way to preserve food, it would probably be freeze drying, because you can freeze dry everything and anything. Eggs, milk, dairy, full soups, anything, recipes you love, lasagna, you can freeze dry it. Ice cream, you can freeze dry it. Canning, you can't can everything. There's actually a lot of limitations to canning. So last year I got my freeze dryer, and one thing I found when it came to freeze drying that I loved is you can just do random amounts. Canning, you really have to have like set amounts of things you need, certain amounts of cups you need to fill a certain amount of jars, and if you have a half jar, you can't process that jar. And that was the thing that I really hated, especially being in a smaller space. I do love canning. I loved canned tomato sauce, broth, stuff like that. But when it comes to things like carrots and green beans and random things that come out of my garden, it's a little bit harder to have a quantity to can. So that's why I would choose freeze drying. You can freeze dry almost everything. Everything reconstitutes really well. And I also love the fact with freeze drying, let me just keep going on a rampage here. You don't have to be just standing in the kitchen all day. I can prep my stuff for the freeze dryer like I would if I were going to throw it in the fridge or the freezer, and then I can throw it in the freeze dryer and forget about it. And when it's done, it's done. I package it up, I call it a day. I'm not standing in the kitchen for 3 to 6 hours canning something. So I would choose freeze drying. How many hours a week would you say you spend in your garden? So I would say at minimum, this time of year especially, I'm putting in minimum an hour a day in this garden. And that's just to get things like watered and kind of picked up. I would say probably on average during like this 3 to 4 month span that I just mentioned, I'm probably spending about 2 hours a day. So what, probably I would say maybe 10 to 14 hours a week I'm probably spending out here, which I'm probably spending more time out here than I really would need to because I'm filming a lot of the time, and that takes up some time. So that's kind of hard to gauge. Maybe an hour a day would probably be the best thing to say. But I do spend a good time out here. I love being outside. And that's one of those things that throughout the years, I keep spending more and more time outside, especially during like times like this where I don't have too much going on this week. It's just really important to get out in your garden and enjoy it and not just relate the garden to work. Go sit in your garden, go be with your garden. It's so nice. What is my watering setup? So I don't have a watering setup. I hand water everything outside of my Oyas. And this was simply because we never planned to stay here that long. I never wanted to set up any type of drip irrigation and then have to move. And now my garden is my entire backyard. I don't mind hand watering simply because certain crops need certain things, and I go around and I test the soil with my finger, and if something doesn't need water that day, I won't water it. So I really don't mind hand watering. It just takes a lot of time. Again, I roughly spend about 30 to 40 minutes probably watering this garden when I have to water, so keep that in mind. Where do you get your seed garlic and what varieties do I grow? So I have always ordered from Mad River Garlic Growers. I really like them. They are from Ohio. I originally found them because they were 6B and I was 6B, and I really wanted to find an organic garlic grower that was in a very similar zone as me. They have all different kinds of varieties. I'm growing a lot of the same varieties this upcoming year. I have Chestnut, I have Georgian Fire. I got some more Ischium Red. Then a new variety I think I'm trying this year, I think it's Russian Red. It's one that starts with Russian. I'll re-look up the name, but it said it was their favorite on the website. So I really wanted to give that a try this year. And right now they're doing pre-order. So I pre-ordered all of my garlic. It will get shipped sometime come October, and I'll plant it out at the end of October. What crops do you recommend for a beginner gardener? So this has been my tried and true thing I've always said to anyone who wants to garden. What do you currently already eat? If you are already eating it, you're going to see the value in growing it. You're going to stick to gardening a little bit longer. If it's something you eat, you're going to go outside, you're going to water it, you're going to tend to that a little bit more. You're also going to see that value because you're going to see all of that time and effort you took into growing that, and then you're going to taste it, and you're going to taste it, and it's going to taste so much better than anything store-bought you've ever had, and it will be the thing that gets you hooked. So grow what you're already eating. And that is my best advice to you. Honestly, if you're growing stuff that you don't typically eat, you're not going to see that value. So start with what you're eating already and go from there. What's the one thing I have found hardest to grow? Onions, 100%. Onions have been very tricky. I feel like the last 2 years I have proven myself a little bit better with onions. I will be harvesting my onions probably roughly in the next week or two. I'm waiting for them to top over, but starting onions was so difficult. I have always tried to grow them from seed. My first few years I had very tiny little onions. I feel like it's just one of those things where if you're growing an onion from seed, timing is everything. I typically start my onion seeds that last week of December, beginning of January, and you can see how long that takes. Like by the time the onions are out, I will be messing with these onions for about 7 months straight, between them being in my basement or here in the garden. And it's just one of those crops I found very tricky. Carrots have been a little bit trickier as well through the years, but I've had great success with pelleted seed. But yeah, I would say onions and carrots are probably my top two I've struggled with the most over the years, but over the last few years I found more success with. So don't give up on those things. I really wanted to grow big, beautiful onions because that is like one of the things I use so much in my kitchen. What is one of my best money saving tips for a frugal gardener? So I have mentioned this so much this year, but look up your estate sales, your garage sales, auctions, things like that. You can find some amazing deals. For instance, like we got a tiller off of an auction. I've gotten so many good sized planters off of auctions. Also, another great tip is to look up soil and compost companies in your area. You can get bulk compost and soil delivered for cheap. Like you can get cubic yards for cheap compared to bags of soil from the store. So if you're starting a garden or needing to establish more space, definitely look into that. I would say both those things have helped me tons. You can also find some great Amazon finds. A lot of my garden beds, if you see the metal garden beds in my garden, those are actually all from Amazon. They average like $40 to $60 depending on the time of year, and they're a great steal. Another great option if you're on a budget is grow bags. They do dry out a little bit faster, so you really have to be on top of watering during the summer, but it's a great option, especially if you need a container or somewhere where you can't like put a garden bed because you're not going to be living there long. So keep all those things in mind. That's really helped me through the years because obviously I didn't really have a job during the time I was building my garden. So we really built this garden on a budget because I really wasn't making much money. So we had to be a little bit frugal when it came to this whole garden. Cattle panels are another really great option when it comes to trellising. These have gotten a little bit more expensive through the years. They used to be $20 a pop, and the other day I was at Tractor Supply and they're $27 a pop, but that is still a very inexpensive trellis. What's something I wish I could grow but can't due to my growing zone? Citrus. I really wish I could grow some like lemons. That'd be nice. So your neighbors are extremely close to you and your garden is visibly seen. Do you have any issues with neighbors? Do any of them garden? So I don't have any issues with my neighbors. I don't really talk to anyone. The only complaint I really have when it comes to like gardening in the space I have it's not very private. I wish I had a little bit more privacy. I don't think many people here garden. I will say my one neighbor has like a garden bed, but outside of that, I don't know anyone else in this general area that gardens. I don't get a lot of backlash. Honestly, I don't live in HOA. No one could do anything about my garden anyway. I have a permit for the chickens. So even if someone were to complain about my garden, they couldn't do anything about it. So I'm just gonna keep doing me. So I really liked this question, and that was one reason why I threw it in here. So personal advice on big life shifts like friends and career related. Do you feel like it's mostly calm in your world with the garden? So I loved this question because obviously, I kind of explained earlier, I was going through it during the years I started my garden, and it wasn't until really last year, maybe the year prior, I started getting more friends that were interested in growing food or were doing something on a homesteading scale. Even then, I can count on one hand how many people I know that do this in my life. When I first started this, it was very lonely. People kind of looked at me like, okay, well, she wants to garden. Then I was doing social media on top of it, and I'm sure I had a lot of stuff said behind my back. But this is just something where I was really going through it in my own personal life, and I found just a great peace in the garden. Like whenever I was in the garden, I just felt very calm. I was off my phone. I was experiencing things in nature. I was witnessing things I never even realized before. And I think I just found my own little sanctuary in my backyard. Sometimes you don't have to be validated by the people you love or your job or anything like that. Obviously, I lost multiple careers during this time of gardening. And this is the one thing that has always been stable for me. Gardening is hard, but gardening is one of those things where if you create a goal and you keep going with it, you'll see success, and it's very addicting, and your people will come to you. So if you're going through a lot of like ups and downs when it comes to friends, family, jobs, career, for me, my garden has been that place that I can escape to. It's quiet. It's my own little space studio. My artisticness comes out in here. So I think starting a garden is great, especially if you're going through something in life and you just need your own little space. Okay, so this is kind of a two-part question. Would I ever keep bees, and how do I keep birds and squirrels from eating things that aren't caged up like my strawberries? So yes, I would keep bees. Bees are something that I really wanted to have for years now, but my space is kind of limited. So it's one of those things where I would like to be at a bigger property. I would like to move before I introduce bees. I think bees in this space would just be a little bit too much, but that is something I'm definitely going to dive into. So when it comes to birds and squirrels from eating things, the one thing I have found, so the last 2 years I've had a bird bath. When I got my bird bath, I read this article that stated that birds will typically peck at your tomatoes for a water source during like that peak hot summer because they need something to drink. And in my experience over the last few years of having a bird bath, the squirrels and the birds have pretty much left majority of things alone. I will say I walked out tonight though, because me and my husband took off the strawberry cage I have because I needed to prune up that whole area. It was getting really overgrown, and we have not put it back over. I wanted to put it back over this morning and I forgot before my husband went to work, and I had multiple strawberries eaten out of my strawberry bed this morning. So the strawberry cage helps out tons, but I will say the bird bath helps out so much because bees, butterflies, wasps, squirrels, birds, they all have a water source. They typically only come, like birds and squirrels, I really have only witnessed come and get a sip and then they go about their business. So I think that has helped me tons. As far as the strawberry cage goes, I do have the next question underneath this is, could I please share more about my strawberry cage and how we built it? So I do have a full video on this that I will link for you guys. This strawberry cage has been the game changer for me. In previous years, I barely got a single strawberry because birds and squirrels love berries. And without them being caged up, it's one of those things that I wouldn't get a single berry unless they were caged, and that cage has helped significantly. So what is my favorite thing to grow, and what is something I would never grow again? What makes you super proud to say you grew it? So my favorite thing to grow, ooh, that is so tough. It'd probably be a toss-up between the onions and the garlic, just because those are the things I use so often in my garden. As far as Something I would never grow again. Ooh. I'm gonna say never. But any type of squash is very tricky for me unless it's vine borer resistant, so I probably won't grow a pumpkin. Which, side note on here, I had that volunteer pumpkin plant I think it was a cross of something, so I ended up going ahead and pulling it because if you don't know, a cross squash can be toxic, and if it doesn't taste good, it's a toxic squash, and typically crosses like that can be toxic. So I just pulled it, and when I pulled it, I found hundreds of squash bug eggs. So I'm hoping that maybe I had like a trap crop where maybe I trapped a lot of that first wave of squash bugs, because I haven't found any other squash bugs anywhere else yet. But there was hundreds of eggs on that pumpkin the other day that I pulled. And as far as something that makes me super proud to say that I've grown, maybe my cantaloupe. I'm really proud of my cantaloupe. My cantaloupe is like just so beautiful. But again, probably my onions. My onions have been one of those things that's very, very tricky, and I've been able to grow big, beautiful bulbed onions the last few years, so I would say probably onions. Ooh, okay, so this next one I love. So as someone who has a bad track record with plants, I've even managed to kill multiple succulents, but I would really like to try to grow some fruit and veg. What would you say was the most resilient one to try? So when I first started gardening, guys, I killed every succulent and cactus known to man. I've killed insane amounts of houseplants. If it's not a houseplant that's easy, it's going to die for me. Honestly, my garden has been 10 times easier than any houseplant I have ever had. And I think that's just because a lot of houseplants can be very finicky. A lot of them are very tropical, and they're very sensitive to different temperatures and daylight and things like that. And water for succulents is another one. I would like overwater my succulents like crazy. I have never had an issue like that when it comes to the garden, so just give gardening a go. You might be pleasantly surprised. Okay, last one for the gardening homesteading section is where do I order seeds from and why? So I order seeds from pretty much a lot of different places. I would say my main sources are Johnny's, High Mowing Organics, Botanical Interest, and Renee's Garden. Those four are my favorites simply because there's a good amount of organic seeds. There's a lot of hybrid seeds, and a lot of the I really like hybrids for the fact I can find certain qualities that I want in the garden, and that is one reason why I really like High Mowing and also the Johnny seeds, because they have a lot of good hybrids that are organic. But Botanical Interest I can typically find in like my grocery store or garden center, and Renee's Garden has some really cool varieties like my Hungarian Magyar paprika powder and my bread seed poppy. So they have some really cool ones. I would say those four are definitely my go-tos, and that's my reason why. Okay, so last up, I had a good amount of chicken questions, so I wanted to make sure I threw some chicken questions in here as well. So first question, I'm wondering, do you switch your flock of hens up every often or so? If so, how long do you have them until you switch them up? This is something that we are going to be planning on doing. So my first round of chickens I had for about a year and a half. They started to have a little bit of health problems. They were hybrid birds, and a lot of these hybrid chickens out there, they're really meant for laying and high production for about a year to 2 years of life, and at that point they start to have some serious health issues, which was something I didn't know. I luckily enough have a friend who has 5 acres not far from here, and he will willingly take any chickens off of our hands. So it's one of those things where we do plan to probably switch out chickens about every year to year and a half. That way we can keep our egg supply up, because if you didn't know, chickens will actually decrease after the first 2 years of laying. And with us having limited space, honestly, I can't just house a ton of chickens that aren't laying eggs. I can legally only have 12 here anyway. I can't have an abundance of chickens. So it's one of those things where it's kind of a tricky game, but I do have someone that is willing to take chickens, let them run on their property, live out their best life, and do their thing. So I will say at the moment we're shooting for roughly every year and a half, 2 years, and that's simply so we can keep our egg production up. Other than that, I would probably just keep them. Once we get more property, it'll probably be something where I just keep a flock of a good amount of birds and not really worry about it too much. With that being said, how many chickens do I have? I currently have 6. Where did I get my chicken coop? So my husband built our chicken coop. He built it without plans. It did take him some time, and I will say if you are getting into chicken keeping, my best advice to you is to have your coop started or already built before you get your baby chicks. Chickens grow so fast. I knew that getting chickens, but once I got the chicks on hand, they grew so much faster in person than I anticipated, and our coop wasn't fully done yet. So I was dealing with some big birds in my garage there for a while. So that's my little advice for you. The build took a little bit longer than expected because he didn't use plans or anything like that, but I love our coop. It's really, really pretty. I always get like plan questions and stuff like that, so unfortunately I have nowhere I can direct you on that, but I know that Etsy has a lot of chicken coop plans if you want to build your own. What kind of chicken breeds do I have? So at the moment I have 2 Wyandottes and 4 Rhode Island Reds. In my previous flock I had Isa Browns and Golden Comets, which those are both hybrids, and my Wyandottes and my Rhode Islands, those are heritage breeds. And the biggest difference between the two honestly is just egg production. So my hybrid girls really averaged about 1 egg per day, and my heritage girls average about 1 to 3 per day. So I will say, quantity wise, if you're looking for the most eggs you can get for most bang for your buck as you can get, go for hybrids. But one thing I've also read is heritage breeds are great for backyard gardens because they're heavier. They have a harder time jumping over fences to getting into gardens and things like that. So keep that in mind. How am I allowed to have chickens in my backyard? So I have a permit. My city allows it. I don't live in an HOA or anything like that. So I'm very fortunate. I think this helps living in Kansas, to be honest, since I do live in farm country. I feel like laws are a little bit more relaxed here, because even in my city limits I could have a cow if I really wanted to. I could legally pay for a cow if I really wanted to. I don't know if I could have them on this property, but it says I could sign it up on my permit. I just had to renew my permit actually. So my permit is good for 1 year. I pay $25 a year for up to 12 chickens, and that's how I'm able to have them. All right, so last few. What is my one chicken product I couldn't live without? I will say First Saturday Lime is one of those that I probably couldn't live without. I probably could live without it, but it's probably one I don't want to live without. So the First Saturday Lime is great because it's very odor neutralizing. It helps with pest management such as mites and lice, ticks, fleas, things like that. And I just found it very helpful, especially being in a smaller setting like I am. Like, I don't want my coop to smell. I typically clean my coop quite often just because I don't want it. I'm in a small space. So that First Saturday Lime is amazing. It works so good. So I would say First Saturday Lime. All right, and lastly, do my chickens lay all year? So they typically lay all year. So in my experience, a chicken will lay in that first year no matter what. So if it's their first year that they are laying eggs, they're probably going to be laying through that first winter season, but it's that second winter season you'll probably see a significant decrease in eggs, or any at all. So chickens will stop laying as much as the sun changes and it gets colder and things like that, and you'll have a surplus come spring. But typically in a hen's first year of life, you're able to get eggs year round. But anyway, guys, I think that sums up all of the questions I had for today. You guys asked so many good ones. I really just wanted to sit down and do a Q&A with you guys because I feel like when the gardening season really gets going, it's one of those things I never really sit down and just talk. I'm constantly vlogging, I'm constantly going, and sometimes I just crave a good sit down video where I can feel like we can have a little bit more of heart to heart. So hopefully you guys learned a little bit more about me and my gardening space, homesteading, chickens, you name it. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you guys all next week. Bye.